Hello, and welcome to another session of Neighbors and Friends. I have with me today two friends, Michael Post on my far left, and here's John Bollenbacher. And I was privileged to attend their wedding last year. Would you tell us how you two met? Of where you, or maybe you want to start?
We met in a neither region, a gray zone between Oakland and Berkeley at a bar, and then we were together for 2 weeks, and then we thought, well, back then relationships really didn't last very long. We thought 2 weeks, that give it that, and here we are 32 odd years later, still together, still very much in love.
Okay. And maybe we should start with where you two are from before you were out in California.
Well, I was born in New London, Connecticut, and my parents were teachers, and they moved around a lot. And after my father died, my mother moved back to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where the bulk of her family was from, and she put all 5 children through school, teaching Anglo-Saxon to undergraduates at Harvard.
Wow.
And then my mother remarried, and we moved out of Cambridge and up into a place called Belmont, and that's pretty good.
Okay.
And I was born in Northfield, Minnesota. Grew up in the shadow of St. Olaf and Carleton. And my parents, well, my father then, I don't remember the year, I think it was 62, bought a supper club in a tiny town in northern Minnesota called Garrison. And we moved there for a year. A small, incredibly conservative place. I was only about, I must have been about 8, but I immediately detested it. It was just, and now I always tell people it was no place for a young queer kid. Just no. It was not a safe environment at all. And then my parents got divorced in '63, I believe it was, and we moved to Mankato, Minnesota, which is back in southern Minnesota, and a much more welcoming place. I mean, it's still a bit conservative, but nowhere near as bad.
So, and you've been here in Iowa City for how long?
Oh, we've been in Iowa City now 11 years, over 11 years.
Over 11 years.
It's
Okay.
very much like home. People are much more polite and more services as you grow older, more curb cuts. People in Minnesota and New England in general tend to be very rude, except in Vermont. That was an exception to the rule.
Yeah, Vermont was amazing.
That's so you've been quite active in various gay and lesbian LGBT groups.
In Mankato, when we lived there, we would participate in their Mankato State's gay group, which is known as SAGE, Straights and Gays for Equality. And then when we moved here, our second year here, the person who had been in charge of the university's gay group, the GLBTU at the time, Jack Pepple, was graduating and couldn't continue to take the lead in the GLBTU, so he asked me, and I took over, and even I was a student there, also a non-traditional student, and I was in charge of it for 3 years, and then Or was it 4? 3 or 4. I don't even remember. And we also are pretty involved with the gay community in general in terms of going to like the guerrilla brunches and things like that.
And we give heavily to queer youth at UAY. We set them up with a library, small, but a library, and we did the same for the Alternative Resource Center. Give to local charities. Let's see, my involvement with gay rights started when I was a teenager, and I was involved with Gay Liberation Front in D.C. Fighting for mentally ill rights, civil rights. In 75, I was given an honorary membership in the Daughters of Bilitis of Boston. I think a crowning achievement. I think it still to this day is a crowning achievement. Went to San Francisco and got involved in disability rights, and then went to Berkeley, moved to Berkeley and became heavily involved in disability rights. And yeah, it's sort of life. If you don't protest, you can't complain later.
No.
Indeed.
Are you familiar with, that group that dressed up as nuns?
The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Yes. I had contact with them when I lived in San Francisco. I was such the sort of renegade nun that I lived outside the convent house. And my name was given to me by Sister LaWanda Rose, and I was named Sister Mary Hazard. Hazard a guess as to where you are going to be if you cross me. And it was a brief stint. After that, I moved to Berkeley and got very heavily involved in disability rights, anti-war demonstrations, and the like. And I met John, and well, here we are, 3 states later.
All right.
And still going strong. I'm rather conservative when it comes to marriage. I don't even believe in divorce. We'll build a separate wing to the house with adjoining doors, but I'm not going to let you go.
I was very privileged to be invited to come to your wedding.
Oh, we wouldn't have had a wedding without you, my dear.
Oh, that's great.
It just wouldn't have been a wedding.
Yeah, it was really wonderful. It turned out to be just about the right size. There were just 13 guests, just some very close friends and a couple of our family members. My sister came down from northern Minnesota, and Michael's mother, Holly, and his sister Barbara flew in from Massachusetts for it, which was wonderful. And the people who lent us the barn that we got married in are a gay couple that live across the street from us, and they're just an amazing pair of people. They're very, very sweet.
Okay.
We had an 11th century Greek Orthodox same-sex union performed. No vows.
It's out of a book called Same-Sex Unions in the Middle Ages, which was written by the late Yale University history professor John Boswell, who also wrote another incredible book on this similar subject called Christianity, Social Tolerance, and Homosexuality, which traces the entire history of the church and their relations with gay and lesbian people.
Right. I think Professor Boswell did research at the Vatican itself.
Yes.
And discovered that the first recorded wedding ceremony in a church was done for 2 men who have always been called saints. And so the Catholic Church has a hard time tripping over itself.
Yeah. They were Serge and Bacchus.
Right.
And that's the one we had done.
And they've been
Mentioned in the,
named as
ceremony.
saints, and yet the Catholic Church has trouble remembering that.
Yep.
So much for that. It was a beautiful service, and it was good to see your relatives there.
Yeah.
Speaking about relatives, Michael, I think you're the first guest I've had on that I know has had other gay or lesbian members in the family tree. So would you tell us about that?
Well, let's see. When you're out on Iowa Avenue, and you look down at the pavement, you will see a quotation that says, "All books are either dreams or swords, Amy Lowell." Amy Lowell was my great-great aunt. She was an out-and-about feminist lesbian in 1909 Boston. And if you wonder where I get my uppityness, that's a good part of it. And I brought her a complete poetry book, a complete compendium of her poems today. And I thought I might read one or two of them.
That would be
She
nice.
brought Imagist poetry to America. A lot of her poems are about gardens and her lover, Ada Dyer Russell. She was a Mormon star, and she was also a Broadway star of her era. She was also a single mother with a child. I mean, Amy really knew how to push an envelope. Fireworks. You hate me and I hate you, and we are so polite, we two. But whenever I see you, I burst apart and scatter the sky with my blazing heart. It spits and sparkles and stars and balls, busts into roses and flares and balls. Scarlet buttons and pale green discs, silver spirals and asterisks shoot and tremble in a mist peppered with mauve and amethyst. I shine in the windows and light up the trees, and all because I hate you, if you please. And when you meet me, you rend asunder and go up in a flaming wonder of saffron cubes and crimson moons and wheels all amaranths and maroons. Golden lozenges and spades, arrows of malachites and jades, patterns of copper, azure, sheaths. As you mount, you flash in the glossy leaves. Such fireworks as we make, we two, because you hate me and I hate you. Let's see. There's so many good ones. It's hard to always to pick one. Let me see.
It's in honor of Amy Lowell that I'm wearing my tie today. Amy Lowell was what today would call a dyke. She liked to wear a white shirt and a tie. Smoked a rather big cigar.
No, she smoked thin cigars because they were called Manila cigars. Yeah. Other than that.
And liked to work at night, I understand.
She suffered from insomnia. She did some of her best poetry at night. I found it. This one I always choke up on, so you'll just have to bear with me. Madonna of the evening flowers. All day long I have been working. Now I am tired. I call, where are you? But there is only the oak tree rustling in the wind. The house is very quiet. The sun shines on your books, on your scissors and thimble just put down, but you are not there. Suddenly I am lonely. Where are you? I go searching. Then I see you standing under a spire of pale blue larkspur, with a basket of roses on your arm. You are cool like silver and you smile. I think the Canterbury bells are playing little tunes. You tell me that the peonies need spraying, that the columbines have overrun all bounds, that the Pyrus japonica should be cut back and rounded. You tell me these things, but I look at you, heart of silver, white flame heart of polished silver, burning beneath the blue steeples of the larkspur, and I long to kneel instantly at your feet, while all about us peal the loud sweet Te Deums of the Canterbury bells. And she wrote that for her lover, Ada Dyer Russell.
Right.
A beautiful woman, true moon face.
And wore large hats and would be the very feminine, along with Amy's more butch manner of dressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as you said, a very famous actress of her time, and I think gave that up when she became Amy's partner.
When she became Amy's partner, then she settled into the more traditional of playing the femme to her butch.
Yeah, and they were made a home.
Amy welcomed her into the house. The house named with 7 L's was named for the 7 Lowell children that lived under the roof. When Amy's parents died, he left her the house and a huge trust fund. And she was watched by the government from time to time because she wrote anti-war poems and the like, and strived for women's rights. All bad behavior.
Can't have that.
At the outbreak of World War I, she sent her agents just scouring the New England coast, including Boston to New York, to buy every single box of Manila cigars they could lay their hands on. And when confronted by the Boston Globe, she looked at them and said, "Well, you don't expect me to give up my tobacco for those doughboys, do you?" Another one where she was being, she and Ada were looking for, I know this sounds sort of oxymoronic, but the two of them were actually looking for a very small cottage in New Hampshire where they could have a lot of garden space. And they were being driven around in her maroon Pierce Arrow, and the car broke down. And they were on the backwoods in New Hampshire, and they found a backwoods mechanic. And she was very used to saying, "Well, I'm Amy Lowell," and that opened the door. And, and he said, "Well, can you pay for it?" And she goes, "I'm Amy Lowell." He said, "No, I don't care who you are. Can you pay for it?" And she goes, "Oh, just call this number." Well, in those days, at Harvard, you had an outer secretary, inner secretary, private secretary, and then you got the president of Harvard. And her oldest brother, Lawrence Lowell, was the then president of Harvard. And he called an outer secretary. He finally got to Lawrence. And he goes, "There's some fat dame here. She claims to be your sister." And he goes, "Oh, dear God, what is she doing now?" "She's across the road sitting on a stone wall smoking a cigar." "Oh, God, that's my sister. We'll pay for it. Just send us the bill." She was very conscious of her weight. She was, by today's standards, obese. But she was generally a loving and kind, very generous person. And she gave to lots of causes. If you Google her name, you'll come up with all sorts of marvelous pictures and everything that she ever published, even stuff that was never published. And you can go and read it. It's lovely poetry. Yeah.
So we've established that sometimes there is, a gay gene that passes a few generations.
Well, Amy's brother also, Percival, who is the man who was credited with the discovery of Pluto, hence PL for Pluto, Percival Lowell. He was at least bisexual, probably quite gay. He had a wife, and that she was a Japanese houseboy, and his wife is buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, and he and his Japanese houseboy are interred in Arizona
At the mausoleum at the Lowell Observatory together.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, it's not impossible that there is a gay gene that was a manifestation of it. Who knows?
When I was very younger and I would act out, as it was told to me, I was told I was just like my great-great-aunt, and I thought, something to live for. Yeah.
It's a very, very interesting addition to the kind of information we're giving the public.
Well, also then with it, last year they published a wonderful queer history book, and there she was. And what was really nice about it was the picture. Her hair was close cropped. She was wearing from the waist up, she was wearing a man's suit, and there are very few pictures of Amy in a dress. She had her coming out party at the Elizabeth Stewart Gardner, which is now a museum. And she was asked at her coming out party when she was going to marry. And her reply was, "A man would only marry me for two reasons, my name and my money. Therefore, I will never marry a man. I prefer the company of women."
Right.
So that set the stage.
Right. And this was about the same period of history of Catherine Lee Bates and her partner.
And Gertrude Stein and
And-
Alice B. Tokies.
So there's a number of that very openness and acceptance by family, by neighbors, by working professionals, co-workers.
I remember.
I don't know how was her acceptance.
Well, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
No, I was accepted by my grandparents about the age of 8. They realized the die was cast, and you might as well just go along with it. My Aunt Carol accepted me immediately. There was no reservation. My parents, on the other hand, and a lot of my neocon uncles and aunts, well, that was a whole different matter. When we first came here, and people asked me when I came out, and well, Flip and Lily would tell them that they gave my mother drugs at the hospital. It induced a labor. Hello, I'm out. I remembered the room I was born in. I remember the color of the walls. I remember the weather. I also remembered that I really didn't like it and started to burrow back in, but, they stopped that. And I was born exclusively gay. I know that. And I was born sterile. I have no gaydar, but a full-blown empath, so sort of. And then John, of course, is pretty much all of that, but he had gaydar, so you see opposites attract. There we are.
Right. So that's an interesting psychic or spiritual awareness. It's unusual.
Yeah.
Yes and no. Well, for myself, when I've ever been asked when I came out, I don't really have an answer because I always tell people in order to come out, you have to be in the closet, and I never was.
You were never in the closet.
I knew I was.
Costumes.
Yeah, I knew I was different from the earliest time I can remember. And I mean, I didn't have any way to describe it. I didn't know I was gay. I wouldn't have had any clue of that. But I knew I wasn't the same as the rest of the
Right.
boys in the
It's
school.
the same for me. Long before we knew the words for it, we know that we are different.
Yeah, we're different. We're not, I had no interest in the little girls in school. The boys, that was a different story. But, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to even imagine how it, how it would be to not know that, I know that's kind of a awful way to explain it.
No. So we have relationship commitment.
Oh,
And it's
big time.
And it's been a pleasure to have you.
It's been a pleasure to be here with you, my dear.
Thank you very
Very
much.
Thank you.
Oh, and we should present you with this present we got.
Baked by yourself.
Oh, no.
No, it's not baked. It's a
Not
little
baked.
lady.
It comes from India.
Comes from India.
Something for you.
Oh my goodness.
This is white Tara. She is a, Tara is one of the manifestations of compassion in Buddhism. And white Tara is specifically the, I guess, kind of like a patron saint of scholars and artists
And librarian.
and people like that, yeah.
So we thought you should have her.
We thought it was just a beautiful statue, too. These are really remarkably well done.
Yes, yes, very intricate, very
The
intricate
detail
artwork
these
on there.
never fails to amaze me. That's got to be incredibly difficult.
May she protect you and keep you doing
She's
good
a
work.
protectress.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here.